Okay, so in a nutshell, today I think it would be good to talk about the leadership that we've had over these past few years, but also very specifically these past few months, because a lot of things have happened. There's and arguably, because I'm sure there's some cases where you could argue against it, a lot of it's due to the leadership. Jessica, you said you had something you wanted to start off with.
Yeah. There's a lot of misinformation going around about what would happen if the election were to be postponed or anything, which wouldn't happen, which probably will not happen because it's not a presidential act. That is an act of Congress, which means it has to go through the democratically controlled House, which won't, it like 99.9% positive it won't happen. But in the event that it does, regardless of whether the election happens or not, in the Constitution, it states in January, those seats are up. They are kicked out of office. So what would happen normally is it would fall, the president and the vice president would leave, and there would be no president and vice president, so it would fall to the Speaker of the House. Now, all 435 House seats are up in November, which means if there's no election, there's no House, which means it falls to the Senate. Now, it would fall to what is called the President pro tempore, who is currently a Republican. However, there are, because the President pro tempore is elected by the majority, whoever the majority is, which currently is Republican. However, there are 23 Republican seats up, and I think it's 12 Democratic seats up in the Senate in November. So again, no election, those seats are empty, which means the Democrats would have control of the House, which means it would fall to a Democrat, whoever they choose to elect as President pro tempore if the election were postponed. So people who are saying if the election's postponed, Donald Trump is going to stay in office forever, no, that's not what would happen. It would fall through the chain of command. Now, if something were to happen and say there was something where it was they postponed the presidential election, but not the House and the Senate elections, then again, it would still fall to whoever the newly appointed Speaker of the House would be. It could still be Nancy Pelosi. If Republicans take control of the House, it could be somebody else. So that's what would happen.
Yeah, I feel like that's important to know, because I've seen a lot of people freaking out about that. It should be good. That should be something people should know, as well as who you're voting for. Like how the reason these things exist and how they work. That'd be great. But the whole thing about the election, all that talk of postponing it is due to this little lovely thing that has stricken the whole world and not just our country, called COVID-19. So before we talk about specifically our country's response to this, because it is a lot different than many others, let's just get a couple these little myths out of the way. There are a lot of different strands of coronavirus, and I've seen a lot of people pulling up stuff about documentation of people saying, mentioning coronavirus in early years and saying that this has been planned the entire time. It was different strands, or whatever the word is for each category of ones. But it wasn't COVID-19 specifically. COVID-19 is the one that we're dealing with now. People say coronavirus because it's easy to remember, and because people don't want to look up science, and all the news will say is corona as opposed to COVID-19. In terms of the broad scope of today about leadership, I personally put the blame on the people, because none of this, it would obviously still be around, but it'd be much easier to maintain and control if people initially had believed it and practiced safety of various different kinds, like not throwing parties for the sole purpose of trying to catch it. However, a lot of the reason that this stuff happened is because the people that people look to as role models and leaders, especially the president and his administration, also said that it was fake and also didn't take any safety precautions. And if you're in a position where you have some kind of following, whether you're a celebrity or a government official, it's on you to help guide those people to be safe. And regardless of whether or not you believe it's as dangerous or whatever, it is real. It is the reason that we're all in this predicament with the economy and all that stuff, because people didn't want to do anything about, like, to be safe against it. So it's both the fault of the people who ignored all the messages and the government officials who told them that's okay and told them that none of this mattered. Because now we're in a position where one of the things that people love to say is like, 45 helped our economy so much. What economy? That shit went crashing down because of this virus.
GDP fall in history.
Yeah. Wouldn't have fallen so much if this was only like a 2-month thing, but here we are on, what month is it, like 6?
I mean,
Seven.
lockdown proper started in March, and now we're finally in August, so...
But I think we had confirmed cases before then. But
We
yeah.
had our first case.
February was our first confirmed case.
Been a long time. People wore their masks before. We wouldn't have to complain about wearing them in Walmart now.
I'd also like to.
Mhm.
I'd also like to know, like, some of those people who were like complaining about masks were all saying because it was hard to breathe, and I actually found, me being a person with asthma, I've had breathing problems my entire fucking life. I don't have an issue with a fucking mask. Like, they're saying, oh, it gets hot so it's hard to breathe. No. I literally see so many people. I have a friend who has severe ass asthma. Like, she needs to have her inhaler on her at all times, and if she has an asthma attack, she needs to go to the hospital. That's how bad it is. And she can wear any type, from the N95, the big ones, to just the simple cloth mask. She's fine.
Oh, Kat sent something in the chat. If you think it's hard to breathe in the mask, you really don't want to feel what it's like to have COVID-19.
It's a lot easier to wear a piece of cloth over your face where you can still breathe in and out comfortably than to have a tube shoved into your throat that could potentially permanently damage you. Like, a lot of singers right now, like, especially for, like, us actors who are in a profession where we need our voices, are being, like, warned, like, you better stay safe because there's a chance that you could straight up just destroy your voice if you're being treated for COVID. Because it's not, you don't just go to a hospital and lie in a hospital bed. There's a machine strapped to you and in you for 2 weeks.
It could be more than that.
Yeah.
Too. It's not, people are like, oh, it's only 2 weeks, it's not that bad. Well, it's
You can
like,
get it multiple times.
People not only can you get it multiple times, but there was a news story yesterday in Chicago. A man who had just been released. He had COVID for 4 months. He was in the hospital for 4 months.
Damn.
Like, it's not just a 2-week, like, I am coughing a lot and I have a fever. Oh no, it's no. You can destroy your life. You can die, and people don't understand because they think, oh, I'll be fine. Well, yeah. Realistically, if I get coronavirus, I will be fine. But if I give it to somebody who's not going to be fine, then that's on my hands.
I think someone pointed out that, like, because, okay, other, like, for example, Asian countries, like, let's say, like, Japan, China, South Korea, they have, it's more normalized, like, if you're sick or you think you might be sick, then you wear a mask in public, and it's not a big deal. Obviously, before, it would just be, like, a couple of people, but now everyone has to wear it, but it's just more large scale now. And I think there is that cultural divide of, like, why are, like, people, like, in East Asia, for example, like, cool with it, versus Americans who are freaking the hell out. And it's just, I think part of it is just that American individualism, like, really kicking in, of just, like, if it doesn't affect me, my life personally, then why should I worry? Because it's, like, it's too, I think, abstract for a lot of people of, like, you know, that doing something that they think is, like, so, like, whatever, I hold a party, could get someone killed. It's like they don't want to think about the bigger picture because, like, in just this society, it's all about, like, me and, like, my things and my life and my finances.
One of the
So, yeah.
one of the things that bothers me is like when they do say like it's hard to breathe, it pisses me off just because, like, again, I have asthma. I know what it's like not being able to breathe, not being able to sleep at night because I can't fucking breathe because I'm having an asthma attack. So, like, these people complaining because it's hot in their mask, it just irks me because, like, you don't understand and you're just being whiny about it. Like, act your age and help other people out.
To tie it back into, like, the overarching thing of what we're discussing today, the problem is a lot of government officials, especially the president in this administration, were saying those types of things, and very much had the mindset of like, well, we haven't gotten it yet. And it's like, well, yeah, you're also getting tested like every day to make sure you're safe. But you're telling all these people who don't have these resources that you have to go out and be reckless. Perfect example is Herman McCain. Is his last name, I believe?
Herman Cain.
Herman Cain. The person who pushed for and attended the Tulsa rally, which people said was not a smart idea, specifically because they knew no one would practice safety guidelines. That's one of the biggest reasons that they said don't do it. Because they knew that that administration and all of their supporters would do nothing to protect themselves. Nothing. No mask, no social distance. And they still didn't, even though the entire stadium was like practically empty. Good job, TikTokers. But they didn't practice safety, and now Herman is dead. And it's kind of hard to feel sad when he literally said, this is a hoax, it's bullshit, y'all are stupid, you are just sheep who want to be controlled. And then he got it doing the thing that people said be safe about. And people are like, well, what about the protests and stuff? They're the ones causing the spikes. People that have been protesting, some of them have been getting it. But the reason that some and not all of them have been getting it is because they are wearing masks and they are constantly being cleaned. In many of these protests, they are social distancing, like some of the ones where they were like kneeling and shouting out people's names and stuff like that, like less of the marches and more of the protests themselves. The violin sigil for Elijah started out pretty distant until cops came and pushed them together. They're trying to do their best to stay safe while also protesting problems that are real and need to be addressed. There are literal cleaning stations set up so that people can go, like, constantly be washing your hands and, like, avoid touching other people directly, stuff like that. They are trying to stay safe. That is a lot different from places like Texas and Florida, where, again, they're throwing parties, inviting people who have COVID to be like, oh, who's going to get it next? And going out and refusing to wear masks. And the government officials are refusing to put any kind of mandates for that.
Yeah,
And it's a lot different, because the masks don't prevent it completely. We understand that. Nobody's saying that it completely stops the spread of COVID and it just disappears if everyone wears a mask. We're saying that it's a lot easier to spread it when you're spitting directly on someone's face than if you put a piece of cloth in front of it.
Yeah, for sure. And like you mentioned Florida, and like, cause you know I live around here, and so I have like the local news on, and it's really like I think everyone knows this at this point, but it's really fucking bad here, and like it's just incredibly frustrating because like the people that were supposed to protect us aren't, and they still aren't, even this late in the game. Like you could I guess debate it in March, like early March, like is this a big deal? But we are in August. Thousands of people, thousands of Floridians especially lie dead, and we have people like Governor DeSantis who is like, you know, tossing this ball around of like, oh, you know, it's safe enough to reopen, but it's not safe enough for me and like my like advisors to meet in person to talk about how safe it is to go to school. It's honestly, it's fucking sickening to see like there's still this like political game of like, will we pass mask mandates? Like, will we like require it with businesses? Like in August, in July, like it should not have been a question anymore. Like ICUs are almost at capacity. In a lot of places, they are at capacity and over it. There's like, I don't remember which hospital, but it was at 106% capacity. They are they are converting other wards just to have enough places to put these COVID patients. There is no room for error. There's no room for waffling around anymore. And it's only going to get worse. And it infuriates me to see Governor DeSantis, like, acting as though this is acceptable in any way, shape, or form. And that, like, it's totally cool for schools to safely socially distance and open. It's not. It was never going to be. Like, especially with, like, younger demographics of children who are really bad at following instructions and don't understand the severity because they're kids and they shouldn't have to understand the severity.
Okay, you brought up a lot of really good things, so I'm going to say them to make sure I don't forget. I want to start transitioning because the coronavirus had a big effect on, like, what you said about people being able to meet, which is what they're using as their reason for why we shouldn't have our elections. But your comment first about the children is spot on, and that's why it's even more pathetic that grown adults cannot adhere to these rules. And, the government's trying to control us. Yeah, it's not like they already have our social security numbers and our addresses and our phone numbers and our tax returns. The masks is what's going to control us. It is annoying, but it is a rule built for people's safety in mind. That is the primary effort. It's not that hard to follow it. I don't know as much as you would about, as so many people love to call him Death Santos, but just one major example of a leader who is hypocritical. Because he is saying it's too unsafe for him to go meet people, but telling people to put a bunch of children into cramped hallways and rooms.
Oh, actually, that does remind me about, like, on that, DeSantis is not sending his own children back, I think, last time I
It was his grandchildren, which,
grandchildren.
like, the parents decide that, but also, you think he would...
He won't send his own grandkids to school, but he'll happily send, like, you know, all these, like, lower class, like, or people of color into the meat grinder, essentially. What a fucking
Looks like he wants them to catch it and die because they don't have access to the same healthcare that we do. It's almost like he wants to kill off all of the black people and all of the Latina and Latino people and literally every minority that could stop him.
Just for clarification, I believe this was Rick Scott, not Ron DeSantis. Advocate.
Oh man, did I mess up that whole rant?
No, you're cool. You're cool because Ron DeSantis is also a massive hypocrite when it comes to double standards in who should return to work, who should return to high.
They're all shitty politicians.
Yeah.
Doug Ducey?
I do believe that the specific, my grandkids have a choice and we're choosing not to send them back, but everyone else should go back. I do believe that was Rick Scott.
Wait. Okay. No, okay, DeSantis is the governor of Florida, but I think it was also Rick Scott who's like, I'm not sending my kids back, my grandkids.
Thank you for clarifying who said what. Thank you.
Well, Rick Scott is the former governor of Florida. He's gotten into so much hot water over his policies and ties to different organizations that he should not have been tied to as a federal employee. I don't have that information on the top of my head, so I'll have to...
It's ironic how a lot of people who fit under the administration that is currently running us have that in common, right. Having ties with people they shouldn't. But before we get to that, because that's the juicy, fun part, like, Stephen made a very good comment about the whole election stuff, and we can't not address that. That is one of... There's a lot of racial issues and things like that going on, but it is so goddamn important that we talk about the fact that the president is trying to squash so many things surrounding this election. Like, he even criticized Fox News, one of the biggest advocates for him, by admitting the truth that his polling numbers don't look so hot. And there's so many things to pull up, and I don't have everything, like how he's shutting down the media and stuff. But I want to start at least with the fact that he's like saying that we should postpone the election, but also in terms of the election itself, how he's trying to stop mail-in voting from happening. If y'all got information on that, please feel free to share, because I don't want to talk.
I have something else. He's also talking about like postponing our election while condemning Hong Kong for postponing theirs.
So I want to talk about the mail-in voting in regards to the U.S. Postal Service. So, as most of you have probably heard, the U.S. Postal Service is being intentionally slowed down. Now, they are a government-owned public service. Now, a lot of people are saying that it's because people want to privatize the business. That wouldn't happen because, again, it is a government-owned public business, which means that if they want to privatize it, they have to go through, I believe it's the Senate, which probably wouldn't happen. They would probably just abolish it before they let it be privatized because, you know. But the biggest thing is that, so everybody is saying voting day is now no longer November 3rd. It is October 20th because that's when you should send your mail-in ballots by if you want to make sure that they get counted. So what is happening is it is being intentionally slowed down so that people see it as a unfit way of voting, and then they don't do it, and that also so that people who don't know about they're saying get it in by October 20th. People who don't know that, they send it in October 30th, and now it's got 4 days, which usually would be enough time, but now it's not, and so their votes don't get count because it wasn't sent in on time. So the way, and there's been a lot of, debate on how exactly you can support the U.S. Postal Service. There's been talk about like their merch store, which is a good thing, but they only get royalties off of using their logo. If you want to support the U.S. Postal Service, use stamps. They get 100% of the profit from a stamp. So use stamps if you're ever mailing anything. The biggest issue with a lot of people saying abolish USPS isn't even with the election. Obviously, that's a huge problem. But USPS is the sole provider of mail for over 1 million Americans. The people out in the sticks in Montana, when FedEx or UPS or any of those, or Amazon, if it's not financially liable for them to send a package out into like northern Montana, they'll give it to the U.S. Postal Service because the U.S. Postal Service is not created to make a profit. It's not there. FedEx is there to make a profit. They're a business. UPS is there to turn a profit. USPS is there to make sure Americans get their mail. That's it. So.
Yeah. And for that reason, it's the most used. I love that quote. No rain, no snow, nor sleet, nor hail can stop the U.S. mail. Love that. That's why USPS is the most popular choice for small businesses, for inmates. Yeah.
It's funny that you mention inmates, because I was just about to talk about how this mail-in thing, especially in terms of voting, is really going to affect very specific communities, and who could they be? Racial ones. Because not a lot of them have the ability to healthily and safely go to polling places. And many of the polling places that aren't trying to be shut down are in white suburbs.
Right.
So, we look at what those voters are. A lot of those groups, as a majority, are not supporting the president. It's almost like it's specifically targeting certain people from not being able to cast a vote. Similar with the inmates thing, they won't be able to send mail, but also in terms of protests, in certain places, if you are a felon, you cannot vote. This is specific places, it's not across America as a whole. Now, if the protesters are getting charged with felonies, and these protesters don't like the president, what happens to the polling numbers? it's you can spin conspiracy theories all you want. Every single little facet of voters being denied in different places, polling being shut down, mail being affected, people becoming felons, they're always the groups of people that are not with this president. Whether it's the group of people for Biden, whether it's third-party people, all of them are not supporters of Trump.
Part of me feels
that is not a coincidence.
I think something very important to bring up there is the recent controversy regarding TikTok and how Donald Trump wants to shut down TikTok. Any group that goes against our current president, whether it be an actual political group or a group that's purely made up of children, is an antagonist. And go ahead, because I know you guys know more than I do. I just wanted to bring it up.
I just have to say, I hate the idea that young people can't stand up and do anything. So as much as I hate the app itself, because I think it's nothing but cringe, the fact that so many people were willing to do something as significant as state their beliefs by trolling an entire rally is incredible. And if you're going to take away that person's voice, because for some of these young people, that's the only way they can speak up right now, especially in quarantine. To take that away, you cannot be the same people who are talking about how lazy younger people are and how they aren't trying to make change, because they are. They're using literally everything at their disposal, including social media.
So what I want to say about TikTok, because my parents are some of the people who are like, no, TikTok should go away because it's a China.
Oh, did she die for everyone else?
Yeah, she cut out.
She mentioned China. The Trump administration wanted to shut down.
The Chinese, it's a Chinese company that runs TikTok, I believe. Mm-hmm. She was probably going to bring up.
Oh, did her internet die?
Probably.
Okay, well, I guess just to kind of piggyback off of that, it's like, yes, I in terms of China and data security, that is important, I think, to be concerned about. How is China using your information, or not China, but just tech companies, because tech companies are not the government. Specifically, I think part of it is also just blatant xenophobia on the part of a lot of people who raise those concerns, just because American companies steal your data all the freaking time, but no one cares if Facebook knows everything about you. They're like, ooh, big scary China is gonna have your information, even though probably companies like Facebook and Google are a much bigger threat to your day-to-day. Anyway,
do you remember the one that happened last year? There was that Age Yourself app where you could take a picture and stuff.
Yeah.
I remember because I took a picture of myself and posted saying I was older. But people were freaking out saying, I think it was Russia was the one that they're like, oh, they're stealing your information. But the administration did nothing to stop that.
Well, so here's what I wanted to talk about. I hope I'm back, and I hope people can hear me.
Yeah, you're back.
You're back.
Yeah.
So my parents are one of the people who are like, it's a Chinese company. Well, like Steven, you pointed out, Facebook does worse. What most people don't know is that back when TikTok was still Musical.ly, because it was a Chinese app and there was concerns about it, the FBI did a search and they find there was that TikTok did no more with your data than Facebook or Instagram or Twitter or any of these other apps. The reason that Donald Trump does not like TikTok is because Gen Z and other people have used it to bully him, which, but then also you cannot buy political ads on TikTok. That is not allowed. He cannot use TikTok to further his own political agenda. And when he realized that, and then he realized it was a platform for people to speak out against him, he did everything he could to stop it. And you know what? There is precedent to ban it because other countries have, like Australia. But when, if his whole reason is the data, if the entire reason is the data, then why did he reject Microsoft, a American company who is respectable in the public eye? Why did he reject their bid to buy it? Which they did. They rejected it today. So and here's what I don't think he understands, is that you know, when one app goes, another one takes its place. Vine died, TikTok came. So if he gets rid of TikTok, we're just gonna find another place to go and
which I think
he's
is
not
currently called
yeah.
Triller. I
I
think
don't
the
know. I've
app
never
is called
heard
Triller.
Here's
Something important
something
to remember
else.
about the TikTok thing, because this is related to the election. So many of these TikTokers are people who are now legally able to vote, whether they just turned age or turned it right after he went into office. No matter what, at this point, the majority of TikTok seems that they're against him. Well, just from the fact that you can go on the app and find thousands of videos of people supporting BLM and all these other groups who also don't support him. But one of the biggest things that's going to backfire for him, because he's clearly doing this for the election. That's the important thing. What's going to backfire is that he thinks by deleting this, he's going to shut them down and shut down their voices. The exact opposite's going to happen. Young people are vicious. We know this. We grew up with the internet. We have seen how absolute batshit crazy young people will get if you try to fuck with them on the internet. He takes away their nice little app where they do cringy dances. They're going to go vote way more than they possibly are now. But the fact that he's so quick to silence people's voices is the main problem. That he is trying to silence people rather than, he even said that he wouldn't necessarily accept that he loses, which is a huge, huge problem, and that should be a giant red flag for everybody.
And, he's silencing his own voters' voices, too. There's not as many Republicans on TikTok, but there are still Republicans. I encounter them all the time. And so it's when he's alienating his own base, too. Because there are Republicans and there are people who use that app to support Trump. And so what are they going to do? Are they going to praise him for saying, yeah, this app sucks? Well, guess what? You were using the app. So,
yeah, I wanted to add, because, there's, reasons that he doesn't like TikTok, for example, is it's a popular, social media website for, people to express dissent, and, dunk on him, make memes or whatever. But it's also, I think, in some respect, it is, it's a source of information that could be valuable to a lot of the people that he's trying to hurt. For example, I've seen quite a few TikToks by lawyers or people who have some legal experience going in English and Spanish, if an ICE officer comes to your door, here is what you do, here's are the legal rights that you are entitled to, and here's how you invoke them. And it's a site where those videos get a lot of shares and a lot of likes, and I think that it would be in his best interest, as with his policy, to try to quash that as much as possible. So it just as much as people are haha, oh, we're finally getting rid of the cringe, it's also it is just very concerning to me to see that website potentially go.
One of the things that also bugs me about this is that he, again, going back to the data thing, how he's saying it's the data, and how there are so many U.S. companies that are much worse. If I remember correctly, it was about 2 days ago, they investigated 4 major companies: Amazon, Apple, I forgot the other two. Google, and one other one. I think it was Alphabet. I forget. But they were being investigated and being grilled for being too big of companies, having too much information on their customers, how they control their company, what they do with their company. And Apple was getting the worst of it because they talked about a lot of their apps and a lot of the things, how one app will do better than the other when it's the same exact thing. And how when it comes to people of color, how they are very discriminatory towards app developers who are people of color. And again, so it becomes a battle, and they just started denying. So when it comes to TikTok and data, I don't see the problem when we have a lot more problems with major companies here.
Something very important to talk about when talking about data and America, most importantly, is America is the country in the world with the biggest spy network for every single other country in the world. And as we know, as we've grown to be taught, thankfully, knowledge is power, right? One of the most important things when talking about any totalitarian government, any dystopia, is knowledge. If you want to control people, what you control is what they know. And as Stephen was saying, TikTok is a source of information. And BLM, the marches, are a source of information. People connecting like this and speaking, a source of information. The problem with what's going on right now is we see the same systematic attack and approach towards people who deny our president gaining information. I don't know how many of you have read this book, but 1984 is a story about a dystopia in which information is completely and utterly controlled. And those who disagree with the government completely are utterly brainwashed into agreeing. That is where we're going. We are currently on the fast track towards a dystopia, and the reason children on TikTok, people our age, are so vehemently against the way things are is almost purely because we've been taught from a very young age. We've been given the information, what the warning signs for this world is.
One of the beautiful things about growing up with the internet, and this is 100% a generation thing, and this is not me saying any one generation is dumber than another. Generations older than us, the stuff that they learned were the stuff that was chosen to be taught to them. This is why that like a lot of the people who were surprised when I said, yeah, the civil rights movement had riots, were so surprised was because at that time they didn't have the ability that we do to access that information that was being denied from us. But now that millennials and Gen Z is growing up where they do have that information, that's why older generations are feeling threatened, and that's why their biggest argument is the whole, like, we're older, we're wiser thing. It's such a problem in even just our school systems. The fact that history is so, like, generalized and, like, made comfortable when in other countries it's not true. I was talking to some of my friends who live in other countries. Like, I have a friend who lives in France and Australia. You know who I'm talking about. I've been asking them, just how do you guys learn about things like the Holocaust and like other major historical events? Theirs isn't cutesy. Theirs isn't like our country came and saved the day and like only joined because we got attacked because we're selfish. But theirs was like about the nitty and gritty about everything that happened. And they go into detail about how Hitler was able to rise to power because of this thing about knowledge, and also because he literally started brainwashing people. And this whole thing about like, oh, not like the Nazis are such nice people to the people that they didn't hate. And it's the same. It is very similar to what we're seeing now. All the like these people who are committing very racial attacks and anti-Semitic things and homophobic stuff, they're nice to the people who aren't that because they're good and friends, or who are that, but they don't associate with the group. Because I have been not associated with the black community before by friends, but I'm still able to see that they are racist towards black people as a whole. And it's all tied into this problem of what you know versus don't know. I didn't know he did these mean things because he's nice to me, so he must be always nice to everybody. That is one of the biggest arguments we're facing right now in terms of like justice for the wrongful deaths of people like Breonna Taylor. But on top of like not knowing, it's also the fact that the government will reveal secrets that are wrong, which is my way of segueing into this next thing. There's a lot of stuff that Donald Trump has done currently while he was president. But I think it's also important to discuss the very long history and patterns that have happened before, because this isn't new. That like this stuff that people were accusing him of and that we're realizing isn't new. His attitude towards the black community. Okay, first off, a lot of people love to use excuse, but the incarceration rates have gone down, unemployment, yada yada. That was on the decline for years. And the Trump administration did not speed that up. They just let it keep happening. So it's great that they didn't stop it, but they didn't do anything. It wasn't them who made this happen. This has been declining since Obama's first term. You just inherited that. So you are not the reason that these things have gone down. So he didn't do anything to help. He allowed the things that are helping to continue. I'm going to just like briefly touch on like some examples of some like racist things, because this is more than like one or two instances that could be perceived as racist. These are blatant attacks on people, and a lot of them are on black people, because these are things I've been aware of for a very long time. In 1973, so a while ago, he was charged with, and later had to sign an agreement, he was breaking the Fair Housing Act by refusing to rent out spaces to black people, or just blatantly lying about whether or not they were available. And he did that for years before they forced him to sign an agreement saying he won't do that.
His daddy did it too.
Exactly. He never apologized for his behavior. He never fixed his behavior. He was forced to change it, which is a problem if someone has to step in and make a law for that. There's also someone who came forward who worked at... Yes.
Was he trying to repeal the Fair Housing Act?
I don't think it was the Fair Housing Act. It was something else that he's trying to repeal right now. He might have recently. I'm not sure.
I'll go Google it.
Right.
But I know he's trying to do something about housing and like make it less fair. Like,
Right.
He was the reasoning was he was trying to appeal to suburbaners who didn't want.
I know what you're talking about. I have it pulled up somewhere, but he's saying that he wants to. What was it? It was something about. It wasn't about Fair Housing Act, but it was something about affordability of homes, because it's specifically.
He's trying to keep affordable, low-income housing.
That's what it was. Yes, low-income housing. Which, low-income housing. Who is that generally? BIPOC. But one of his former employees at Trump's castle came forward and said anytime that Donald and Ivana would come, all the black people had to go to the back. Which
that was one of his casinos in New Jersey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's oh my God, there's so many things. I'm trying to like cut it down.
So just going, but like taking a deeper dive into the housing practices and what that essentially does, that's stopping that's putting more roadblocks for lower class people getting to the middle class. This has been the Tea Party struggle. Really, what people like Mitch McConnell have been doing for a couple decades now is trying their darndest to stop people from getting to middle class, and to erase the middle class. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No, that's so important.
It's also not even just classist. It's what it is it's a modern way to bring back segregation, because how are the schools and the voting districts based where you live? So if you have all of the black people in this community and all the white people in this community, then you
start closing their polling places.
School. Right, but you have all the white kids going to that school getting that education, all the black kids going to that school getting that education. It is a modern way of segregating. It's segregating. It's bringing back segregation without having to change the law.
Yeah, keeping places gerrymandered.
I'm glad you brought up the income thing, because something that a lot of people don't realize is like a lot of people who are critical of people standing up and speaking about issues will say don't mix the issues together.
Oh, but they're so
racial issues and so like lower class, middle class issues are very related, Because if the black community, I'm going to talk about black communities because, again, I can understand that. If black communities in general are a little underfunded and don't have resources and don't have things like education, generally, they're going to be lower class. So if there are laws that specifically target lower class, on the surface, it doesn't appear to be racial because they're not saying black people don't get to move into our neighborhoods, but saying that low-income housing doesn't afford to. If the vast majority of the black community is low-income housing, that's saying, hey, black community, we don't want you in our neighborhoods.
Right.
And that is putting a literal rule that they cannot get out of there. A lot of these black people who talk about how, and it is so sad, a lot of black people who do build up their success, many times, it's because a white person gave them that. It's because a white person said, I'm going to help you. It's because a white person gave them the money and resources to do it. And that's such a thing that I don't think people understand. In general, for white people, if they are going to build up something, usually they don't have to wait for someone, particularly of another race, to give them those opportunities. They have to take them on the off chance that they have them, because it's luck-based as well, and go with it. For a black person, you have to have someone advocating for you. And it's there's so many stories about a lot of musicians have to support each other and get each other up because one will make it and they'll be like, well, now I want to see more brothers and sisters in this industry, so I'll start finding some and shoveling them in. Well, Miranda is the perfect example of that. And we can argue whether or not he's doing it right, but he has to do something because no one is. There was a post the other day about the well-known playwright that everyone knows. He was the only colored person. And I think that's important to express really quick. But it's... And back to the thing of leadership, he has done such a horrible job of facing any racial issue that has come up. Whether it be immigration, whether it be police brutality, every single racial issue that has come up, he has done a horrible job of addressing. And addressing it is one of the very first things you have to do, because as a leader, people are going to look to what you say, both the people who support you and the people who don't. The reason that many of his supporters have never, as a whole, spoken out against people like the Nazi community is because his initial answer was, there are some good people. But the reason that they're so quick to speak out about protesters and assume that we're all violent, aggressive criminals is because from the very get-go, he called us that. And from then, continuously, he is continuing to say these things. He hasn't done anything. He hasn't passed any laws or anything. But because he is in a position where there are people who are going to follow his lead has been very, very biased and just blatantly wrong. Say what you will about some of the past presidents, but they did a good job of addressing issues when they could and well. Not passively, but clearly. And they never, what I think is good is that they never took sides, which is great, in my opinion. I don't think they should. But they never excused any behavior. Mm-hmm. And that is the biggest thing.
The credence that he gives. Mm-hmm. It allows people to continue in their oftentimes more bigoted beliefs.
Yes.
I just wanted to point to a resource that I linked in the chat from the World Health Organization, briefly on this subject. Our president refuses to stop calling COVID-19 the China virus, the Wuhan virus, the China flu, yada, yada, yada.
The Kung flu, which he thinks is just acceptable.
He says, oh, there are so many names for it. You can call it whatever you want. No, you can't. You absolutely can't.
And I really want to talk about why you can't, because so many people are like, but it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
There have been so many cases, and of course it's not in the attention because all of this, my community is the one being blasted in media right now. There are so many cases of Chinese American people being just blatantly abused by normal Americans. There are stories and posts of people getting attacked, physically attacked, because people will blame them for something when, a woman was set on fire. And a lot of these people, they're Chinese American, but for a lot of them, one of my friends is born in America, Her parents were born in America. Her grandparents were from China and came here when they were children. They were never around when all this started. And first off, they didn't send it to specifically screw over a country. Take off the tinfoil. But now people are attacking people because you're calling it things like the Chinese virus. Because people are like, oh, it's their fault. But also, those people who tend to follow these specific leaders also aren't the people who are educated enough to distinguish the difference. Because there was Korean American people and Japanese and Japanese American people who were attacked because all of them are the same to these people. Getting beaten and mistreated, and because you're calling it that, like, it doesn't seem like a big issue to you, but if I...
And it's not even just, like, physical threats, it's also, like, financially and emotionally, just because financially, like, people think Chinese virus, so Chinese food, oh, Chinese food must be dangerous as well. And so, like, a lot of Asian run small businesses, because everyone paints East Asians as all Chinese, they're all taking a lot of, like, massive hits to their business because everyone's too scared that they'll get coronavirus from some rice or noodles, because they're just in this, like, conspiracy hole of, like, it must be from them.
There was actually a post I saw a while back in the Instagram thing called College Confessions, and there was this girl who, she's Asian American. Her family owns a nearby Chinese restaurant on campus, and everyone's so scared to go that they're close to shutting down. On top of that, that's her way of paying for college. That's the only way she's paying for college, is through whatever money her parents can make through the store.
Yeah, and I just also wanted to add on for, like, obviously I can't speak for the East Asian community, but it's, like, going on the CDC website, because earlier in the pandemic, like, you know, the CDC website is going to give you the information you need to, like, know symptoms. And I searched it up, and the first thing on their COVID facts page is, no, Asian people are not more likely to have this virus or to spread it. Like, and it was just the fact that they have to put that as the first thing to know about this virus, because it is getting that bad for people of Asian descent, is absolutely sickening.
Just a quick side note. Funny that you mentioned bankruptcy. Why is the person who had to file for bankruptcy like 3 or 4 times for a college and university that he run think that he can handle the economy of an entire country? Anyway,
Can I hop on to what Steven was saying?
Yeah.
About, so basic, I just forgot what I was going to say. Come back to me, I just forgot.
Okay.
I'd like to put at least my button on this issue. The source that I linked in the chat is from 2015. And it specifically, the WHO specifically asks people not to ascribe, I'm going to read verbatim, terms that should be avoided in disease names include geographic locations like Middle East Respiratory System, Spanish flu. People's names like Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, Lou Gehrig's disease. Species of animal or food like swine flu, bird flu, monkeypox, cultural, population, industry, or occupational references like Legionnaire's disease, don't call it that, and terms to incite undue fear. So the WHO asks us not to describe diseases based on all of those guidelines. So that no population is unduly affected in all of the various ways that we've discussed already.
People don't listen.
People don't fucking listen. People don't listen. And because, as we were saying, people don't know the difference between someone who is other A and other B. They tend to just attack anybody who is other. I hate to call out during this Zoomcast. I love everybody here. I especially love Leslie. But the reason why I felt like this should be brought up and Leslie should be here for this chat too, and I'm sure other people in this chat have gone through similar trials and tribulations. I know for a fact that Leslie gets mistaken for Asian when she is not. Her heritage comes from a completely different part of the world, but people still perceive her as other, and they attack her for it. And it's I know that it's come down on her head during this pandemic, that people have othered her as someone of Asian heritage who's going to spread this virus, and they've attacked her.
It was at the start of the pandemic when I was in the train, and as soon as I walked in, everyone around me started moving, and there was this one man. It's like, get off the train, and of course it said an Asian derogative, and they were just very uncomfortable with me being around there. Which, by the way, I'm not of Asian descent. I am Mexican, so either way. But hi, I'm Leslie. For those of you that don't know me. One of the many reasons why I don't like that Trump is calling it the China virus and Wuhan is that we're blaming, like you said, you brought it up already, people. We're blaming the Chinese community. Why, for me, whenever he does that, I think, so you're trying to distract us from the real problem. They're not the reasons why it came over here. Actually, this strain came from Europe. Let's actually talk about the actual reason why it spread so quickly. And it's because, to put it in the simplest form, you are a bad leader. You didn't act fast enough. So instead of wasting your time and your tweets and your energy on blaming other people, accept the fact that you were wrong and make change.
I think it's important to acknowledge that too. It doesn't matter where it came from. It matters that when it got here, for months, first we denied it, then we accepted that it was here and did nothing about it, saying it'll just go away. And there are multiple interviews where he said it will just disappear, and it didn't. And then on top of that, in many different ways, it wasn't handled well. Whether it's how we were helping the people who had like essential workers versus people who couldn't work anymore, all that stuff. I want to transition into something else quickly, but that negligence to do anything when something strikes. There's one specific example when he did during his residency where he also neglected helping. Hurricane Maria hitting Puerto Rico. When he refused, first off, to believe that those 3,000 Americans died, and then refused to give them anything to rebuild. And he tried to divert that money, ironically, to Texas and Florida, the two states with the highest COVID cases. Weird. But it's so important to acknowledge the fact that he neglected a place that, as a president, he's supposed to protect, because that is, in a way, part of our land. Like, it's not a state, but it's part of us. As like yes?
When Donald Trump when you say the word American to Donald Trump, he sees a white person. Specifically, he sees a white man.
Cis white male.
So, yes, he sees a cis-het Protestant white man. So the notion that Puerto Ricans who are not white are American, and that's also, it brings up the whole debate about whether Puerto Rico should be a state or not, which a lot of people will bring up the fact that they voted to not be a state. They voted to be a state. The U.S. government just didn't accept it.
as a Puerto Rican, I think it's a perfect time for me to have returned, as Puerto Rico and its statehood has been a contentious debate in Puerto Rico. But the question on the island is not a matter of should we be a state or not. It's a matter of should we be a state or an independent country. And the thing is, the whole point is that Puerto Rico is a part of America and gets all of the problems that comes with being a part of America, but gets none of the benefits at all. So the whole question is, would Puerto Rico benefit further from becoming a state? And although for a very long time, Puerto Ricans almost unanimously agreed not to become a state, in recent years, this has changed drastically and dramatically to the point where, as you said, Puerto Ricans have agreed to become a state, and America has turned them down multiple times. Now, with this case with Donald Trump and Hurricane Maria, this was not just a failure of Donald Trump. I will say, although Donald Trump completely and utterly failed in helping the Puerto Ricans, there was some money that was sent. Now, was it anywhere near the amount of money that was sent to Texas and Florida? No. And did it match what celebrities like my parents or Lin-Manuel Miranda sent to Puerto Rico? No. However, the Trump administration did send money to Puerto Rico, but it was because the mayor and his friends took that money from the Puerto Rican people and they used it for their own selfish purposes. I don't remember exactly what they did because it's been a long time and I haven't researched this in a while, but I believe they went on yacht trips. They blew the money on themselves, purely selfishly. That money that was meant to bring the Puerto Rican, I almost want to say country, territory back on its feet. And again, this was just like $3,000, $4,000, nothing compared to what the Trump administration sent to places like Texas or Florida that weren't even hit nearly as hard as Puerto Rico was after Irma and Maria. Both struck the island consecutively, both of which either narrowly hit Florida or Texas or hit, I believe Texas was hit slightly harder than Florida. A substantial bit harder than Florida. However, this is no justification for the absolute paltry amount of money that was sent and was subsequently abused. Now, to talk about failure of power, Trump did not just fail by not sending money or sending a small amount of money, but by not checking or globalizing the information about this mayor. Most people don't know what happened. Most people don't care what happened. And most people don't recognize. And it took a very long time to recognize this because it wasn't until there were Puerto Rican riots in the streets akin to what our riots looked like in the wake of people being killed in America that people noticed anything. And these, like in America, were peaceful protests. But unlike in America, the government did not respond by sending police troops. They responded by kicking the corrupt politician out of office and moving the island towards a better and more healthy environment. And again, I think at some point bringing this conversation topic up with my parents and actually getting one of them on call would be a very good idea, because my mom and dad arguably saved Puerto Rico. They created them and other celebrities like Lin-Manuel Miranda that are Puerto Rican, put a lot of money together, created a hurricane relief fund, and my parents had a bunch of people working out of the goodness of their hearts, sending money, sending donations, and gathering a following. Again, it's people that are outside of the government that are doing more than the government. That's what becomes the problem. That's when it's a problem. When it's innocent, random people doing acts of kindness that are doing more than our entire American government or the Puerto Rican government was doing for its people. Puerto Rico and its situation with Hurricane Irma and Maria is a microcosm of what's going on now with communities of color, with the LGBT plus community, and it's terrifying to see it in display. I encourage anyone watching this to actually research what happened in Puerto Rico. And I implore you that everything that's been reported is 1,000 times more tame than what actually happened. My parents flew to Puerto Rico, and it was bad. It was bad. I myself did not go. I was here in Miami doing things that I needed to do, but my parents, they took time out of their lives to go help people. And I'm just saying that it's very important to look at this situation if you want to understand what's going on now and why people are so angry and upset. It's not about please interject, please. If there's anything that I'm missing, but it's not about how America is just segregating and ostracizing these communities, but it's about how America is completely and utterly denouncing them. It is oppression at its finest. Look at Puerto Rico, visit it, and tell me, what do most people tell you about Puerto Rico as an island? It's tropical, it's beautiful, the resorts are wonderful. It's a tourist trap. But take a second to leave that little bubble and look around the rest of the island that is a part of America. And you'll see animals in the streets. You'll see people that, they look bare bones. You'll see these communities that are rich with culture, but clearly are being gentrified. You'll see a clear distinction between what is white Puerto Rico, American Puerto Rico, and the rest of the Caribbean island. In fact, look at the rest of the Caribbean. As Puerto Rico is obviously not the only example of this, I went to the Dominican Republic at some point with some of my family, and we got on a golf cart and started driving around the actual island itself. And I remember just feeling absolutely horrible for these people, because there are resorts where people live in the lap of luxury, gated, keeping these people out of all this money and wealth. And here we have people that are struggling to survive, selling every fish that they catch because that's all they can do, because education is not very good. And as I said previously, if you are to suppress people, all you must suppress is knowledge. Look at Puerto Rico's education. Is it anywhere near as good as the States? And now compare that education system to, smaller communities filled with minorities. Look at the education. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say in regards to Puerto Rico that I remember off the top of my head. But I think it's very important to look at Puerto Rico, because as Bennett said previously, history may not be repeating, but it's rhyming. Again, I love that quote. Great quote. It's rhyming, and right now we see it. And we see these things happening in different ways, and we see these Latin people being oppressed. And we, as a people, aren't standing for it anymore, but our voice is shut down. And people wonder why we're upset, why we're angry. why we call for action. We call for action because we see people like this Puerto Rican mayor being taken out of power. We see a response. We're angry because change can be facilitated, change can be made. And those that ignore these screams and cries for help have been ignoring them for far too long. But their nescience has to end. As much as they can say that things have to go back to normality, I think that is only applicable, obviously, if everyone can reach what is normal for a white person in America. No fear, no worry, no concerns about going back home. I mean, I remember I went to Puerto Rico and like, you just see dogs roaming the street, like stray dogs. When was the last time you saw a stray dog in America? Like, and where did you see it? If you saw a stray dog in America, where did you see it? Was it in the suburb? Was it taken care of? Did it have a collar around its neck? Did it have a little thing that said, call little Janice and tell her that her dog is okay? No, these people are living in the streets with animals. I don't know. I just think it's very important to address that Puerto Rico is America. Puerto Rico is a part of America. It's in the debate to become a state. And as much as Trump and other white Americans may not be comfortable with the idea of a massively democratic state entering and changing the status quo, we have to remember that America is a place that is meant to engender the freedom of speech, freedom of character, and a collection of different cultures and ideals. It's meant to be this bastion of freedom. And to those that do not understand, I think the problem is not that they don't want to help people, but that they fundamentally don't have an understanding that there are people to help. They fundamentally fear that this change will bring about oppression for those that the change seems to be against, but that's not the point. The point of all these movements is like Black Lives Matter, feminism, anything that regard like LGBT rights, all of these movements. The whole point is we live in a land that calls itself the land of the free, the land of the strong, the land of truth, the land of justice. So where is the justice? Where is the freedom? Where is the right? Where? So my question for anyone that's watching this that has any kind of belief that minorities are not oppressed, that and obviously I don't think you've gotten this far in this video if you believe that. However, I challenge anyone to tell me, do you genuinely believe that we live in the land of the free? Can you tell me that 100% certainly? Do we live in a place where everyone can be safe? Do we live in a place where where running away from Britain, the colonizers of the world, was a good call? Do we live in a place where we unify different generations, different ideologies, and different people under one flag and can safely say that all of those people are safe, healthy, free, smart, and capable human beings. I don't think anyone can confidently say yes to that if you've watched this far into this video. And if you can confidently say yes to that, how and why? Because I want to see it. The thing that everyone wants to be when we're talking about rights is proven wrong. I want to be proven wrong. I want you to prove to me that I have just as many rights as a white guy. I want to see people like Zai succeed completely in a field that's dominated by white people. If you show me, I'll happily agree with you. I want to agree with you. I want you to be right. That's my point. Look, we all want to agree. The problem is we have to get there. We have to get there. We have to make it so that we're not just a collection of states. We are a nation. We are a people.
That was really insightful and really powerful. So thank you for that, Jorge. It was really good.
What's very important about a lot of what you just said is that a lot of these issues, sorry, I'm muting because I hear echo. Don't ever apologize for that. Don't ever apologize for that. I say as someone who apologizes for that. But
you said everything you needed to say, Jorge. So,
in relation to like what, especially about what we gathered to talk about, is the issue not that no one is saying these issues exist because of this administration, but these issues have been amplified because of it in many different facets. One of the biggest examples, and one that I really want to display, because I feel like I haven't done a good enough job of it, and I feel like I haven't been a good enough ally for doing so, is that, especially during coronavirus, the community that's been hit the most is trans people. Specifically, the president and the vice president have been very clear that they're homophobic. You can't disagree with someone's lifestyle. I don't disagree with your Christianity. I don't disagree. Gay people aren't attacking straight people. Saying we want to be represented is not an attack. It's saying we want what you have. They have been very clear that they hate gay people. And they don't need to say that they do, even though in many ways they have. They recently announced that they want to fight against the same-sex marriage law, that they want to remove that, which is a right to life, which we boast so much that everyone has, but we had to make a law in the past few years for that. Recently, with the whole corona thing, the reason I say that transgender people have been hit hard is a lot of people have gone homeless, right? That's a huge issue. Trump just now pushed for many different politicians to make it illegal or to say that homeless shelters will no longer be accepting transgender people. In terms of healthcare, there have been many pushes by Trump and his administration that removes, I forget what the exact law is, but it's the law saying that you cannot discriminate someone from receiving healthcare based on their sexuality, trying to remove that. So doctors can feasibly say, I do not have to do anything to treat you, even just a basic checkup if you are part of the LGBTQ+ community. And even in some cases, if you're a different race. So it's not just, it's another thing that with BLM, And there are people who have been marching in these BLM protests. I don't want to say members of, because they just joined these past few months. So who knows if they joined because it's popular. But a lot of people have been saying not only anti-Semitic things, which is atrocious, but a lot of people have been refusing to march for the names of the dozens of black trans women who have been found dead in the past month and a half, I believe. And just for some who have passed away in years prior. And the biggest problem with that is because of this administration we have now. Because Obama never came out saying that, like, gay people are gods. He said gay people are human beings and citizens. And he fought for that. He showed people that these American citizens deserve the same things we have. This administration is saying that they're filth, saying that we're the ones that are trying to ruin the country. It has been a blatant attack, removing the literal rights of the entire LGBTQ plus community, and especially transgender people. Especially. And all of that is blamed on the administration. Transphobia does not exist because of them, but it is as big as it is now because of them. They amplified that. It's not your job. You don't.
It was.
It's not
encouraged.
Yes, it's not expected that you're going to get rid of it. Not a single leader have we ever assumed that you're going to get rid of all the racism or all the sexism or anything. But it's your job not to make it worse. And that is what you did. It is the same argument with cops' jobs are supposed to protect people. And you've made their safety worse.
Something that my mind always circles back to, in thinking about the government's role, this administration in particular, this administration's role in rolling back protections for marginalized communities of any sort. We're specifically talking about LGBTQ plus issues here, though. So with that in mind, something that always irks me is like what I thought Civics 101, what I thought of as Civics 101 when I took that class in high school. I don't know if y'all had to take civics, but it was enlightening. It was required. It was like sophomore year of high school, whatever. Something that struck me as like obvious for any respectable government is the separation of church and state, and how so as a 15-year-old being taught that, I thought, oh yeah, of course, government has nothing to do with religion. Government shouldn't be predicated on religion. It shouldn't advocate for or against any religion. That seemed pretty obvious to me. And so in the following years, watching, again, we come to this, like, talking about the Tea Party branch of the Republican Party. Watching those, like, right-wing groups demonize LGBTQ causes, LGBTQ people, I was always very dumbstruck as to, like, why that was even, why that held water for anybody, in anybody's mind. But I guess as it relates today, we're seeing all of that. It really started with that bakery in Colorado refusing to refusing to make a cake for a gay couple. That sentiment has, like, it's my religious freedom to deny somebody else a service. That thinking, again, being enabled and encouraged by our administration, it's so ass backwards to me. You know, during this whole chapter of this talk, something that I keep thinking about is how the only intolerance that should be acceptable is being intolerant about other people's intolerance. If you get what I'm saying, like, I absolutely, I got no problem. I don't know why there would be any issue, person to person, human to human, between someone who is Catholic and someone who's Hindu, someone who's Jewish and someone who is a Scientologist. But where you should come down pretty fucking heavily is on people who are intolerant. You can't watch someone giving a sig heil and calling for the death of Jews and all non-Aryan people and say, we should hear him out because it's his right. Freedom of speech protects him. No, freedom of speech doesn't protect you against being intolerant. And, fuck. I think I might have just misspoken. Someone please feel free to call me out on that. Anybody who happens to be watching this later on.
So, what is something very important to mention with this freedom of speech thing?
Yeah.
This whole idea of being free to say whatever you want. There's also other freedoms that people ignore when they do that, and I think it's important to mention that there's freedom of speech, and there's also freedom of religion. What that doesn't mean is that this is a solely Christian nation. It means that it is free for anyone to practice religions.
Right. Separation of church and state.
Exactly. So when, say, I don't know, the current president has spent the last few decades fighting a literal verbal war about how he does nothing but demonize every single Muslim because of what happened in 9/11, it's not freedoms. It is straight up oppression, because if you, not only has he claimed that Obama was, because for some reason if you don't like someone you have to attribute them to being a Muslim, as if Muslims are inherently bad, which they are not. But the fact that he called for a straight-up ban of Muslims in America in general, it not just like traveling anymore, in general, all of them gone, is one of the most rhyming motherfucking things to old school Germany that has happened.
Right.
And another thing that rhymes is this whole idea that you have the freedom of your religion to deny someone from eating at a bakery. Seems very similar to the whole thing of, you can't get a milkshake here, Blackie, this is a white-only store. It is the exact same thing.
One of the things my dad likes whenever I talk to him about politics, one of the things he likes to say is, there is freedom of speech, but you have to deal with the consequences that come with your freedom of speech. And that being, because of my religion, I refuse to serve you or bake a cake for you. Okay, they got blasted all over social media. They were on the news. They were sued, I believe. And a lot of these college kids who were saying, all these vulgar things, I'm not going to repeat it because it's just that it hurts my heart anytime I hear it. But some of the vulgar stuff they're saying about Black people, about Muslims, about Asian Americans, about Hispanics, a lot of the stuff that they're saying and what they say is like, my freedom of speech, they're losing their scholarships for it. It's like, okay, you want to say that, you want to go, like, I'm going to speak out about it, absolutely. You want to say that, go for it. You will deal with the consequences. You will lose your job. You will lose your scholarship. You will lose any school you try to apply to. You'll lose your business. So
there you go. Keep going.
It's just one of the many things that comes with freedom of speech is you have to, not in a way, yes, be careful with what you say, but understand this is the world we live in.
So, I think there's a misconception about what exactly freedom of speech means. Freedom of speech means you can say whatever you want to an extent. Freedom of speech allows me to say, I don't like Donald Trump, and he can't do anything about it. Freedom of speech does not allow me to say, and I'm allowed to say this because I'm saying I cannot say this, I'm explaining it. Freedom of speech does not allow me to say I want to kill the president. That is illegal unless I am saying you cannot say that. So there are limits to freedom of speech. You cannot send death threats. Those are illegal, despite technically being free speech. So I think all of these people who say, like, freedom of religion and free speech and blah, 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 they have to understand that that's up until a certain point. And then we also talked about, like, you can't, like, get a milkshake here because you're Black, or you can't buy a cake here because you're gay. A lot of these people are now facing that same thing, and they're like, what do you mean I can't go into Starbucks because I'm not wearing a mask? It's like, well, you're upset about that, but didn't you just support the fact that Susie and Jenna can't get their wedding photos because they're gay? So you cannot have it both ways. So either you're wrong, you can't deny somebody a service because of something that there is their own belief or whatever, or you're right, and you can't go get your Starbucks unless you put a piece of cloth over your face. You cannot have it both ways.
I appreciate the idea behind that, but I do want to express that those are not similar issues. In the same way that Black Lives Matter and Blue Lives Matter are not the same issues. One is a rule. It is clothing. It is the same thing as no shoes, no service. It is something that was put in place, and whether or not you like the rule, you still had to follow it. I know people who don't like to drive around with seatbelts, but you're supposed to follow it because it's a rule, and you'll get in trouble if you get caught without doing so. Gay people are gay. That is not a piece of cloth they can take off. It's the same deal with I cannot remove my skin. So do not compare it to a uniform that you actively chose to do, knowing the consequences of putting that on. You knew that it was going to happen. So I get the idea behind what you're saying, but I do want to express that we cannot equate those two things, because one is something that is controlled based on bigotry, and one is something done that is like a rule in place for people's safety.
I just want to say that that, like, the idea that, like, Jessica was expressing of people being, like, equating these two things is a very concerning issue when it comes to, like, discourse of, like, social, like, justice and like dealing with coronavirus, just because it's just very frustrating to see that, like, something that is meant to, like, protect everyone, it's these people who are, like, you know, WASP, like, cishet, like, people who have never been forced to really consider their place in society, or, like, how other people, like, would, like, make them act, or like they perceive it as an attack on their freedom, because they don't understand what a real attack on someone's freedom even fucking looks like. They really don't. And, like, you know, I have seen people like it is like the waspy people with like vaccines and masks. I've straight up seen people like comparing, oh, I can't go to school unless I get a vaccination. That's just like Jim Crow laws in the South in America, which it absolutely is not. But it's just like it's a bubble that they are living in, and it's just very disappointing to see.
Something to keep in mind too, once again, relating back to a lot of the things like the stuff that we're talking about today, that leadership gave them that idea, saying that they're being discriminated against. There are government officials who jumped on this whole thing that Karen is a racist word now, and reinforced that mindset, convincing them. It's the same thing with knowledge, just in the opposite direction. They're enforcing wrongful information, and these people are accepting it.
I think just to kind of summarize a lot of what everyone just said, I had a quote in the back of my head while I was talking earlier, and I feel like it, and I just kind of made it up. But to put it succinctly, your own personal freedom should not come at the cost of others' oppression. That is all.
So I want to start like wrapping this up, but there's something I feel like I have to address since we're talking about leadership and specifically the president. It's the hypocrisy of attacking other people who don't agree with you, and we discussed on like the many different ways he has, but one specific case, this whole Epstein issue, just in general, the case of pedophilia and how wrongful it is. And regardless of how you feel about Biden, people are saying that he is, a pedophile because there's like so many creepy clips of him. But I want to express this. There's a huge difference between kissing children on the back of the head, which you can deem as creepy. That's fine. I've seen people argue saying, well, people's grandmothers used to kiss you on the face with both cheeks whenever they meet you. What's so different? That's up to personal interpretation, because I think that's kind of a cultural thing, because my grandparents never did that shit. Especially not my dad's side. But if there's a difference between that and between the president, who, and I have this literally on my phone, has been found in court to be guilty of raping children. And I'm completely serious in what I just said. I am not exaggerating anything. That is what these documents say. And I didn't believe this for the longest time because I assumed that it was people fighting political whatever, because when I started to see these things was around the same time when people started saying things about Biden. So I made the mistake of not doing any research. I assumed it was just a way to fight back. Then I read them.
Receipts.
Oh my god.
Receipts in the chat. I believe you, and I know what sources you're talking about, but put the receipts for people who don't.
Yes. I'm going to have to type out this entire link, so forgive me if I type it slightly wrong. Yes.
Can we also talk about the fact that he sexualized his daughter from the age of 13?
Yes. And that on live television.
He said he would date his daughter or have sex with his daughter.
Mm-hmm. Also, that he said of the person who is directly tied to Epstein, that he hopes that person's doing well. And I'm going to say this example personally because I relate to it slightly. Never apologize for saying that we should bring back the death penalty for the Central Park Five, even after DNA evidence came proving their innocence, because that's what it took for them to be free. Right. Yet another case of hypocrisy.
That was something that I thought you were going to bring up back when we were talking about his discriminatory housing policies. Because this guy has a track record of discrimination and throwing his money towards the subjugation of minority groups. It's a long, proven track record of indifference towards human rights.
Mm-hmm. And what aggravates me so much that people aren't realizing is that this really only happens when against, like, of late, he only ever says these things about opponents, people he find to be a threat to him, because there have been conservative people who would fit under his scope of these, like, ideas of, racist, sexist, whatever ideas, but because they're on the same political party as him and used to support him because he's been losing a lot of support, he doesn't want to do anything about that, but then will be so quick to trash on anyone who is seen to be against him, who are the exact same or doing the exact same things.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I'm double checking to make sure this link worked, and it did.
Sweet. Yes, thank you.
But yes, this is a court case. I believe it's him and someone else that were brought to court about it. I read this a few days ago, so I don't remember perfectly. But yeah. But again, it's a huge thing of knowledge. I refused to educate myself about it, and I kind of ignored it. But it's the reason I brought it up, though, is it's that hypocrisy. If he's convincing his followers that they should fight all this pedophilia and stuff, and it's gotten to the point that they've now are starting to say, like, screw BLM and stuff. We need to focus on the real issues of pedophilia. First off, as if we can't focus on more than one. And second, as a way of diverting, but then he won't even address the very real evidence there is that he's committed these things.
Right.
Because it's not a matter of solving these issues, it's a matter of denouncing anyone who dares oppose him. And that's not the behavior of a president. That's the behavior of a king. I'm going to say king because I'm hesitant to say tyrant, but we know what the subtext was.
I think this dovetails very well into talking about. Hang on, Jorge sent something. They aren't normally allowed to.
I think we should finish up the conversation with that. But please continue, Bennett.
This segues into a larger conversation about human trafficking at the border, which is it's an ongoing problem. I remember a couple of years ago, I traveled to Texas for a contract. That's where I met Leslie. And at the time, people were starting to get very angry about the detention centers and the working practices of ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. And a lot of the pushback that I was seeing was, well, this shit was around when Obama was in office and he didn't do anything about it, so who are you really mad at? And it's like...
I can be mad at 2 presidents for
Right.
enforcing
I
such
can
policies.
be mad at 3 because it goes
3.
all the way back to Bush. Like...
I want to bring this up because I've had this conversation so many times.
Yes.
Me and all these people saying abolish ICE are not defending that the past 2 presidents have done this or caused this. What we are arguing against is the fact that for the first time since this happened, dozens of children have died while in custody, dozens of children have been starved, and many of them have been raped. Because that did not happen while the other presidents were in control. Yes, they still shouldn't have been held in the way they were, but again, it's the problem of these problems have been amplified. The exact opposite of what you're supposed to do.
Well, I wouldn't say it wasn't happening. I just think it wasn't reported on, or it was just ignored. And because it's been amplified, it's because it's been it's because it's been amplified that it's coming to light. It's kind of like the Me Too movement, how all of this stuff had been going on in Hollywood, and it wasn't until until a whole bunch of other shit involving women had come up, and one woman had come up talking about Harvey Weinstein, that it blew up.
I grew up on the border, exactly where it's happening right now. I live 15 minutes away from where they're holding all these people. I can tell you, first off, it's been happening since I was a kid. It's always been a thing. It's always been an issue. And I was just talking to Bennett about it. My recent issue is, thank you so much for bringing it to light. Thank you for caring. I just wish people would care when it wasn't trending.
That's exactly how I feel.
Exactly. And these people are still being held. And the thing is, a lot of the people are coming from Honduras, from El Salvador, Guatemala, and what's happening is that they're coming in large caravans, and a lot of the people on this side, in the States, are very afraid because amongst these caravans, the cartel are hiding, and they are sex trafficking some of the people in the caravan, and they do hide weapons in their bundles, and they do hide drugs in these people, in these children, and then they get rid of the kids once they get to the States. So just imagine what that means. It's always been an issue. Right now I have friends on the border who are giving them supplies and shelter, but what bothers me so much is that my community back at home, they have to make a GoFundMe to support these people. That's what it's coming to. So if anybody else wants to take over.
You just reminded me of something that another of the many things that good old 45 has said about one part of this immigration thing is like a lot of people think it's just like, well, we don't want immigrants anymore. He expressly said he doesn't want immigrants from in this particular example, Haiti and Nigeria, but then he's saying stuff about how he wants to accept more immigrants from places like Norway. So in other words, let's only accept them from wider countries. I feel like it's important to express that because it's not just immigration in general, it's immigration of certain people.
And a lot of these people that come over, they're just looking for work. They're just looking for safety. They're running away from violence. They're running away from poverty, and they come over here, and guess what? They work in the fields, and they're harvesting all the stuff, all the food for you, and then you complain that are you doing it yourself? I'm sorry, but this is something that I've always felt so passionate about, just because my dad was migrant worker, and he didn't get a citizenship until I was 13.
Yeah.
And
no, go for it. No, continue.
No, go ahead.
After you go, because this is a different tangent. No, continue. Okay, well, I was just gonna kind of talk a little bit about what Zai brought up with the prioritization of we should get more immigration from Western Europe. And with Norway or Denmark or the good countries, the good immigrants, and I think that people kind of paint it with a broad brush of how the immigration issue works, but it's just a very intense intersection between class and race and why. I think that even just the whole immigration system is undeniably broken, but even if without these human rights abuses, even without that, just the principle that we want only the best ones. We want people who are, they have to be educated, and they have to have this and that, and they have to have this much resources. It's disheartening to see, because why is it so wrong for a person to want to come here to improve their family's economic situation? That people are oh, well, we only want people who are actually need to immigrate. Well, it should, I am just very frustrated because I don't think there should be all these financial barriers to immigration. I think just people have a right to improve their lives and their families' lives the best way they can. And it is frankly sickening to be oh, well, I'm not against immigration. I want the right immigration, because it's just a dog whistle. It is all dog whistles. And then, like, even when something's so blatant and in your face, just to see, like, such an uncaring, like, majority, because, like, Leslie was mentioning, like, how people have to do GoFundMes just to, like, keep people afloat. And it's so just tragic to me, especially, like, just as a person of color, as a Latino person, to see, like, you know, just the majority going, oh, well, like, we still support Trump, though, even though we're literally seeing camps. Like, how can you look me in the eye and say you respect me as a human being when there are people from my, like, ethnicity, or just from similar countries of my ethnicity, that are literally dying in camps? You cannot, like for example, my uncle, huge Trump supporter. How can you say you love me as a member of your family if you are willing to let people like me die and suffer? And even if they don't die, even if by some, like, miracle of God they find their family again, they are forever traumatized and broken. There have been children who 20 years from now, 30 years from now, decades in the future, will still be suffering the effects of having their family torn away from them and to not know where to go, or have their language and culture erased because they're being held in a camp in fucking Texas with, like, no guidance, no adults to, like, pass on that information to them of, like, where they come from, who they are. This got ranty, but just, yeah.
History repeats once again, stripped of your culture. My people know that very well. I apologize, but I want to start wrapping this up because we've been talking for a very long time. But I do want to address that thing earlier. How did we let a criminal become president if criminals are not allowed to vote? And Jorge, you were the one to bring this up. I think you should say something about that. If you have anything.
I mean, pretty much everything that came to mind is just suppression of voters, which has been talked about for a very long time in certain communities. And here we have Donald Trump, who is, again, a criminal, charged with pedophilia. And how is he allowed to run for president? That's all. It's just a simple question that I think we all know the answer to, sadly.
Money, power, 1%.
Race.
That too.
Another case of other versus, because when the other, which for him and his administration and his followers is colored people, when the other does something, it should be punished. When I do it, I should be given the chance to be forgiven. We dropped a lot in this, and I'm going to do it tonight because I keep saying I'm going to do it, and I keep forgetting. I'll make the folder where we can put all these resources where they're organized so people can find it and learn on their own, because people should be willing to do that regardless. The thing I really want to leave this off on, one of the biggest thing that frustrates me when talking about any of these issues is the idea that you have to stay perfectly level-headed. You saw many of us in this call today very passionate about something because it involves our fucking lives. And to not be passionate about it is a problem. Your disconcern for it is more concerning than the fact that we get emotional. So if that is going to be your reason to ignore us and refuse to learn, you are not concerned with the people. You're concerned with this perfect idea of what the perfect American citizen should be. And unfortunately, that idea has become the cisgendered straight white male. And that is not the only American. And it's definitely not the only American who built this country. You can ask every single one of my dead ancestors who don't know where their great-great-grandfathers are from.